All right, let's jump right into this explainer and experience the terrifying true story of how a bustling London was completely swallowed by a suffocating death trap. We're traveling back to December 1952. London is a thriving post-war metropolis. It's alive with industry and millions of people just going about their daily lives. But within a matter of hours, this incredibly vibrant city is going to be brought to an absolute standstill, literally paralyzed by an environmental disaster of unprecedented proportions. It's a crazy story of weather, rapid industrialization, and honestly, a chilling reminder of just how quickly the air we breathe can turn entirely against us. Now imagine waking up to an atmosphere so incredibly thick it blinded you. And it wasn't just visual, it carried a bitter, undeniable taste of sulfur that immediately burned your lungs. This wasn't just some heady morning mist that annoyed commuters. No, this was a physical presence. People who actually lived through it described it as a blinding darkness you could literally taste. It seeped into clothes, it coated your skin in this greasy, black film, and every single breath felt like inhaling tiny shards of glass. It was an immersive, inescapable nightmare that descended over the whole city, blocking out the sun and plunging London into a terrifying premature twilight.
And here is the truly shocking part: how fast it all happened. Over just 5 days, a modern metropolis descended into absolute chaos. Day 1, the fog arrives, completely unnoticed. Day 2, infrastructure collapses and panic sets in. Day 3, hospitals are overwhelmed as the fatalities start to rise. And by days 4 and 5, London officially becomes an unbreathable death trap.
So, let's start at the beginning. Day 1, the trap closes. You really have to understand, Londoners were entirely used to these so-called pea supers. For generations, the city had dealt with thick, yellowish fogs fueled by coal fires. I mean, it was practically a cultural hallmark of London. And because of that familiarity, Day 1 created this tragic boiling frog scenario. When the smog started thickening up on December 5th, well, nobody panicked. People simply buttoned up their heavy coats, lit their own coal fireplaces to stay warm, and went about their business. No one had any idea they were in severe danger until it was way too late. The very thing they were using to stay warm was about to become their executioner.
It was basically the perfect, deadly storm of meteorological conditions that sealed their fate. Step 1, a massive anticyclone settled over the region, bringing completely windless conditions. Step 2, a temperature inversion occurred. Now, normally air gets colder the higher up you go, which allows warm smoke to rise and disperse. But an inversion puts a layer of warm air high above, trapping a layer of freezing cold air right down at the surface. It essentially put a massive, invisible lid over the entire city. And then step 3, millions of Londoners, feeling that freezing cold, piled more cheap, high-sulfur coal right onto their home fires. All that toxic smoke poured out of chimneys and had absolutely nowhere to go. It just filled the trap, getting thicker and deadlier by the hour.
Moving right along to days 2 and 3. Chaos.
The sheer scale of the systemic breakdown was just staggering. By day 2, visibility dropped to mere feet. The mighty London transport system, the absolute lifeblood of the city, collapsed entirely. Trains stopped dead on their tracks. Drivers, unable to even see the hoods of their own cars, just left them idling in the middle of the street and tried to walk home. But it wasn't just a massive inconvenience, you know? It was a rapidly unfolding health crisis. By day 3, overwhelmed hospitals began to buckle. Wards were filling up with citizens, from the very young to the elderly, and they were all presenting with the exact same terrifying symptom. They were suffocating in the open air. Even ambulance services had to be suspended because the drivers literally couldn't navigate the streets.
People found themselves completely trapped in blinding darkness, desperately struggling for air. Imagine trying to walk home and not being able to see your own feet. People were actually trailing their hands along brick walls just to find their way down familiar streets. The smog was so incredibly thick that it seeped right into cinemas, making it impossible to see the screens. The air was heavy, acidic, and entirely claustrophobic. It was like a sensory deprivation nightmare, combined with the horrifying physical reality that every single breath was actively poisoning you.
Which brings us to the climax of the disaster. Days 4 and 5. Suffocation.
By this point, London was no longer just a city. It had become an unbreathable cage, where everyday people were collapsing in the middle of the streets. But what makes this part of the story truly chilling, at least to me, is that you weren't even safe indoors. The toxic smog relentlessly seeped under doors, right through keyholes, and around window frames. Even inside their own sealed homes, families found the air turning yellow and bitter. People with asthma or pre-existing conditions, they had nowhere to run. The environment itself had become utterly hostile to human life. Now look at these numbers. While initial government reports cited around 4,000 deaths directly caused by the smog in those 5 days, modern historical estimates suggest the true death toll was actually up to 12,000 people, with tens of thousands more suffering severe, lifelong respiratory illnesses. These cold, hard mortality figures hit like an absolute sledgehammer. But what's really important to remember here is that these numbers stand in brutal contrast to the deeply emotional individual stories of citizens. These were mothers, fathers, and kids who simply couldn't catch their breath in their own neighborhoods. It was a mass casualty event brought on entirely by the air they breathed.
Finally, let's look at the aftermath and future warnings.
So as we dissect the catastrophic systemic failures of 1952, we really have to ask ourselves, could a disaster like this happen again today? It is so easy to look back at old black and white photos of mid-century London and think of this as just some relic of the past, right? A problem completely solved by modern regulation. But the actual mechanics of the disaster, weather, trapping pollution over heavily populated areas, that is definitely not a thing of the past. When you compare the coal-choked air of 1952 directly against our modern climate and pollution threats, the parallels are undeniably sobering. Back in 1952, the culprit was unregulated domestic coal fires and heavy industrial smoke. Today, well, the sources might look slightly different, but the core threat remains. We're looking at increasing occurrences of massive wildfires that blanket entire continents in thick, hazardous smoke for weeks at a time. We're still dealing with systemic industrial pollution in rapidly developing megacities all over the globe. The exact same meteorological phenomenon, that temperature inversion we talked about, can easily trap modern smog, vehicle exhaust, or wildfire smoke over a major city, creating a thoroughly modern death trap. Because the air we breathe is largely invisible, we tend to completely take it for granted. But, as the Great Smog of 1952 proved in just 5 terrifying days, that air is only as safe as the regulations and the systems actively protecting it. So, are our current global systems actually strong enough to prevent the next Great Smog? Or are we, kind of like the Londoners of day one, just totally unaware of a trap slowly closing around us?